occurring, whether there's data gaps in the actual data set. And so we're extrapolating from a very small data source, or whether we're just skipping over communities altogether. So I would say one of the best ways to combat that is to, wherever possible, A, support the best available science and the best available scientific sampling techniques, and B, we need to have folks in office that believe in science and the value of science. And so that includes appropriating government funding to presumably produce unbiased results in these types of studies. And because when we have, the companies funding this type of research, results are sometimes skewed. It makes me think of results from like old tobacco studies and even sugar studies, where the sugar industry has consistently changed results of studies to reflect that carbs are really what is making people obese in America, not sugar. So it's just something to consider. So when you're thinking about voting or engaging in the process, I think it's really important to have folks in office that are base their decisions for these types of issues on sound science.
I also want to highlight the point of your question, was what can I do in order to get more access to this data? And I think several people on the panel have already kind of briefed on it, but something that's really great is that this is very difficult data, and it can get very complicated, especially when talking about policy or the way that the data gets compiled, or who funds the data. But the good news is that there are hundreds of nonprofit organizations that specialize in specific issues. And so what I would recommend is, for example, you just heard Zalal and you just heard Kelly talk about very specific things that they do, and a lot of nonprofits, for example, Louisiana, we release reports that specifically say, for example, we released a report on the Deepwater Horizon spill that happened up the coast of Louisiana and the health impact across the coast of Florida because of that. And so you would be surprised the amount of resources that nonprofits have already, began to do. So I think that that's the importance of these types of discussions, because the idea is that we can build on each other's work instead of constantly recreating the wheel. And so when you talk about how do I get access to this information, there are so many different issues, and there's just such a vast array of different routes that you can go. So my recommendation would be okay, so what is the specific type of data that I'm trying to get, or the specific type of information that I want to make more available to my constituents or more available to my community, and research. Is there a nonprofit, or is there a university, is there some kind of research institution that is already having that conversation, or that is already reporting on this issue? I think that's a really solid place to start, because I've been living here most of my life, and it hasn't been until this 1 year working through Oceana that I have just opened my eyes that there are literally hundreds of organizations doing similar type of work. So you'd be surprised if your neighbor or some person in another neighborhood is doing the same thing on a very specific issue. So that's where I would start.
And something else just to add to the conversation about where can we access data, or where can we just access information. In Florida, we do have a very broad public records law, and so depending on the type of information you're seeking, when it comes to health information, as was already mentioned in regards to HIPAA and the Florida Cancer Registry, it can be a lot more difficult to get street level information or what might be necessary. But if you are seeking information from state agencies, from state governments, from your local governments, from cities and counties, you are entitled to request that under public records law. You can send an email, you can go in person, and they need to provide that information to you, or at least provide a very valid reason why they cannot under the public records law. And so that's obviously something, we're happy to, a few of us are attorneys, and the folks who aren't, I'm sure, have filed many public records requests, and so that's something that we can also talk about as well. Yes, question?
Yeah, I was actually just interested, just because I understand that there's a lot of things that companies, I understand that they're in for profit, and from, our perspective, I would assume, there's a balance between, trying to be environmentally safe and viable, and then, they need to make their profits. Is there a way to find common ground where maybe organizations can help make technology that would help them stay profitable, but yet still achieve or a goal of maintaining the environment safe. Are there any foundations that do that?
Sure, I could provide an example specifically with the solution we're promoting, which is harvesting the sugarcane without burning the excess plant material first. And what we have found is that elsewhere on the world where sugarcane is grown, the same plant material is utilized economically. And so what we're doing in our campaign is trying to promote that, not only can this solution, end the public health issues associated with this ongoing nuisance, but it could also create new jobs in a community which is starved of jobs. So yeah, you definitely have to walk a tight line when dealing with certain companies that are engaged in utilizing these materials to make their products, and trying to promote the sugar industry to maybe be more open-minded and make the investments into utilizing this plant material, which a great example is that we point to a lot is mills in the country of Brazil. Since they've phased out by certain state laws sugarcane burning, they've used this trash to help generate electricity at their mills to sell back into the public grid. And they're already doing this to a certain extent with the byproduct from the stock, which is utilized called bagasse. They found that by utilizing the trash, they can increase their electricity output back in the grid by 70%. So it's just a matter of promoting what's been done elsewhere and really trying to open minds, and we believe in our campaign that our solution would be a win-win situation for all parties involved. So yeah, that's not the case in every campaign and every issue, but it's definitely worth doing research, because there's a lot of innovative technologies out there that can provide economic solutions that people aren't aware of.